My name is Adam Sliger, and I am a music producer, and I am here to answer your questions from Twitter. So first up, from Tasneem Jacobs, we have this important question. Music producers, how do you get over the fear of opening the DAW? Now, if you don't know, a DAW is a digital audio workstation, and it's the software that you use to record and produce your ideas. I think the number one way to get rid of fear around opening your DAW is to start with an idea from somewhere else. So instead of opening your DAW and looking at a blank screen and getting intimidated, I think it's awesome to start by writing down some lyrics in a notebook or play on an instrument. Basically, have a reason to open the DAW, so you have an idea that you actually want to start capturing, even if it's just like a sample, a sound that you found and recorded on a voice memo, whatever it is. Start with something inspiring, start with an idea up here or on an instrument, and then open up your DAW with the purpose of recording that idea. Ray Sukiman with the world's most important question, why is mixing so hard? Now, mixing is one of the hardest parts of making music, and it's so hard because there are so many decisions to make. There are no right or wrong answers when it comes to mixing. It all ultimately comes down to having really good taste and knowing what you want to happen within a song. And there are so many decisions that you have to make that all kind of stack up to a good mix or a not great mix. And the weird thing is there are objective qualities that you're going for in a mix, but also so many subjective qualities. So it's kind of a balance between being technically a good mix and creatively a good mix. Now, Kellick asks how to make snare good. And that is a huge question in music production. Something that we all have struggled with is getting a snare to sound good. And I think the main thing you want to start with is not having your snare sound bad. So a snare drum is going to be driving a lot of the rhythm of your song. So you want the impact of your snare to suit the song. Some songs you want a big, loud, thick snare. Sometimes you want a chill one. So if you can get the attack of your snare, which is like that hit, to have the amount of impact that you want, that is the first step. Now the next part is getting the actual decay of your snare to sound appealing. So sometimes a snare will have like a ringing out kind of frequency that you don't want, or it will decay in a weird amount of time. So you want to kind of tame that snare so that each hit has a nice attack, and then it's not ringing out with an annoying frequency, and it's decaying in the appropriate length of time for your song. That can be achieved with compression, EQ. You can also send your snare to some reverb to get like a nice appealing ring out. Basically, it's a whole big thing, but that's a good starting place. Fitz says, I want to learn so bad how to produce, but I don't know where to start. I can only play piano. Good news for you, Fitz. Knowing how to play piano is a great way to start music production, because a lot of music production is being able to play melodies, chord progressions, things like that into a DAW. So if you already know piano, I think a great way to start would be to get some music production software, Pro Tools, Logic, GarageBand, Reaper, really whatever it is, and then get a MIDI keyboard, and then get a couple software instruments or use the ones that are built in, and just start trying to record ideas that you come up with on the piano. Amir wants to know how to learn music theory quickly. And that is a tricky one because there is an infinite amount of music theory that you can learn. I think a great place to start is understanding the relationships between different notes when it comes to making chords. For example, you have like a major chord and a minor chord, learning about like thirds, fifths, sevenths, eighth, nine, just kind of figuring out the numbers that are associated with each note and then how those chords sound. I think that's a great place to start. Karen Shetty wants to know how every single NPR Tiny Desk concert sounds so good. And that is kind of a two-part answer. So for one, they have a really nice space for doing things like that. There are a lot of objects in the room that act as like pseudo acoustic treatment, all the bookshelves, all the desks, all the people. They're recording in a place that's gonna sound natural and good for recording something like that. And then they also have a really awesome crew that has the right gear to make something like this sound good. So they're putting the knowledge that they've learned from making so many episodes of Tiny Desk, along with the gear that they've selected to make a great sounding session. And all of that together comes together to make a great sounding product. I think another aspect of it that I haven't seen anyone really talk about is the fact that a lot of the artists really bring it when they're doing Tiny Desk. They take it very seriously and they're really trying to nail it because it's such an iconic series. And I think that plays a part as well. Miss Socialite wants to know how much studio time usually costs. And this is gonna be a huge spectrum. So on the lower end, there are studios that will charge like $25, $30 an hour. That's usually just for the room. And then if you wanna add an engineer, maybe you're gonna pay them 20 bucks an hour too. That's kind of on the cheaper end. There are studios that will charge hundreds of dollars an hour because they have so much equipment and they have really skilled engineers. So it's gonna be a wide variance across the board. Abby wants to know how they can soundproof their room and setup without spending big bucks. Now, there are a lot of schools of thought on this. I think one of the best ways is to start with a room that is already kind of halfway there. And what I mean by that is if you have a room with vaulted ceilings, that's a great place to start because the floor and the ceiling being close to each other and symmetrical, sound waves are gonna ping pong between those two. And those ping ponging sound waves are a lot of the problem. In the same vein, if you have a couch behind your speakers, that's gonna absorb a lot of the sound waves and stop them from ping-ponging around. If you have bookshelves and things like that around the room that also help break up those sound waves, that will help, and that's generally free. So if you have a room that's already full of stuff that's gonna help stop those sound waves from bouncing around, that's a good start. Now, one important thing to understand when it comes to soundproofing is that mass is an important factor. So those foam panels that just have the ridges that you can stick on the wall, those will do something, but they're not very dense or thick. So I think a better use of your money versus buying panels like that is actually building your own. So you can get fiberglass insulation that's 2 to 4 inches thick, and then build a frame around that with wood, wrap that in burlap, and that will actually be very cost effective. You can hang those on the walls and that will cut out a lot of those reflections that you don't want. And you'll actually save money versus buying a product that's made out of foam or something else like that. Justin, can we finally admit the car test is a myth? That's a great question. I don't think the car test is a myth, but I don't think it's some magical cure-all either. I think as producers, mixers, mastering folks, we should be trying to make our room and our mixing environment sound as good as possible for translation. And what that means is what you're hearing from your speakers, if you play it in the car, it's gonna sound extremely similar. If you play it on a boombox, it's gonna sound extremely similar. Basically, you wanna nail your mix or your master so that it sounds good on all kinds of sound systems, not just the one that you're listening to. And the way you do that is by getting good speakers for mixing or mastering, and then treating your room so that the sound isn't bouncing around, so that different frequencies aren't gonna sound exaggerated or they're gonna be missing. You basically want as accurate of a situation as possible. The car test, I think, has the most merit when you're working somewhere unfamiliar. So if I'm in someone else's studio, I didn't do their sound treatment, and I can't be 100% sure if their room translates, then you can go to the car, some speakers that you listen to all the time and you know how music sounds on them, play your song, and if it sounds good on the car test and it sounds good in that studio, then I think you can sign off on it. But ultimately, we should be trying to get our setups to sound so good or accurate that we don't have to do the car test at all. So Maestro the Illest wants to know, how do you start ear training? And ear training means a couple different things in music production. So when it comes to things like relative pitch, ear training is basically if you play a note, let's say I play a note and I tell you it's E, So now you have that baseline of that note is E. Now I can play you another note, and you can use relative pitch to say, okay, from E to this other note, well, that note is F sharp. Basically, you can recognize the difference between two notes and know what that interval is. Now, another type of ear training that producers and mixers will sometimes do is EQ ear training, where there will be different frequencies and you have to kind of identify those frequencies, like in an EQ setting, like bass frequencies, mid frequencies, treble. And that is something that I think can be really useful, because if you hear a track, you can identify what's bothering you about it and use EQ to cut those things out. So there are a lot of free apps and websites and videos on YouTube that have ear training exercises. So I would just pull up any of those and get to work. All right, so we've solved everyone's problems with music production. There should be no further questions, but if you have questions you want to ask a music producer, go ahead and leave them in the comments. I would love to make a part 2 of this where I answer questions from the comments. And if you like learning more and more about music production, I drop a new music production video every single Friday, so subscribe if you want to keep up with those. Other than that, I hope you have a beautiful day, make some awesome music, and I'll see you next time.